Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back on ArchiDiaries with yet another interesting interview. We recently completed a very interesting interview series in the form of Shades of Green 2, and it was a fantastic experience to talk with nine different practicing architects from all over the world and to know how they are practicing with respect to sustainable approaches in the field of architecture and design. We had the last interview with the architect Rafiq Azam from Bangladesh, and it was really a fantastic culmination in the form of an interview with him. After the culmination of the interview series is basically where we take up a theme and we invite people who have been exploring with that particular theme and do a set of interviews in order to explore various approaches that people are exploring. So now we are back with our regular interview series, which is what we call as Reflections on Architecture and Design. In Reflections, we invite people from all fields. There is no particular theme here. We invite distinguished people who have been practicing with distinct approaches, exploring new possibilities, avenues, and ask them to share their work, their research, and we try to talk to them and find what they have been exploring. So we are back with the fifth interview in this series, and I'm really glad to share that today we have Rahul Bhushan, founder of North Himachal Pradesh Craftsmanship and Design Innovation Institute, as our guest today. Rahul, welcome on ArchiDiaries.
Thank you, Raj. It's my pleasure.
We also have Prutha from ArchiDiaries to help us with streaming on YouTube and help taking us questions from YouTube. Please feel free while the Rahul is making presentation and even after making presentation, you can type your questions in the comment sections in order to engage with Rahul. So without much delay, please allow me to introduce Rahul. Rahul Bhushan is an unshakable optimist and visionary, born and brought up in Himachal. He is an artist, holds passion for architecture and design, an author, educator, and an activist working closely in his homeland to empower local communities and villagers. He is the founder and creative director at North. Apart from his engagement with new media arts, architecture, heritage restoration, and cultural ecology, he has been actively involved in local community driven projects, creating indigenous products and processes involving local villagers and farmers to generate livelihood. The title of the talk that Rahul has chosen for today is Empowering the Intangible Cultural Heritage of the Western Himalayas. I would like to invite Prutha to read out the text that Rahul has shared.
Hello. So, the title of the talk is Empowering the Intangible Cultural Heritage of the Western Himalayas. Growing up in the mountains, amongst all the building practices in the Himalayan belt, Rahul came across Kathkuni. Kathkuni imbibes the essence of mountainous communities along with their beliefs and traditions. This architecture and the regional craftsmanship is a useful reminder that flexibility, not strength, is key to longevity. It is necessary to take steps to preserve it, revive it, and then empower it. An ode to coexistence is formed quite naturally through this art of making. This is how people at North approach life. A regional center which serves as a platform to engage and sustain the crafts, heritage, and cultural ecology of the state. I invite Rahul to share his presentation with us.
Thank you so much. And so let me directly start with the presentation, and I'll share my screen.
Yeah.
Okay. So as today's topic, what I wanted was that because we were talking about this intangibles, which are basically feelings which cannot be measured. So the idea is to take all the viewers today and you all to go through a journey with me. And this basically will be through the time which has been there, and how the story of the tribal people unfolds. And yeah, so when we talk about intangibles, we are talking about the feelings which cannot be measured, something which does not have a physical presence in life. And then we are talking about culture, which basically is a manifestation of human intellectual achievements, and where we talk about art, which is a physical kind of a form. And then we look at different social behaviors and customs and rituals of a region. So all these things are pretty defined, and that definition gives it basically is called culture, right? Actions of people of that region. And on the other hand, we have intangible. So when these two contradictory kind of words are coming along, we basically are looking at the feelings behind this layer of art and social cultural fabric. So what I want to say is that only then we can really understand these physical forms of indigenous craftsmanship, which we are going to talk about further, and this vernacular architecture, which is coming from all these intangibles, and like Kathkuni in Himachal, and various different art forms, handloom, food is like a art of the region, and metalworks, wood carving, all of these. So let's go on this journey as a immersion into the past of Himachal and people of Himachal, and we'll try to basically understand Himachal intangibly, so that we can later look at the art and the craftsmanship in a certain way. So life in mountains is very easy. It's also a lot of hardship, but like people are not stressed about things. We tend to enjoy the things around us. There's a lot of empirical knowledge, the values which have been passed down to each generation from the previous one. And these empirical knowledge basically is a set of experiments and observations and material exploration in some senses. And then there are the traditions which can be seen in how people behave, how people dress up, and how people greet each other. So these traditions have been there um, since past, and so comes the craftsmanship with this. And if we look at craftsmanship through this lens, we will recognize the value of the heritage which it is carrying. And so this talk is how to empower all of these for the future generations to come. I would like to start the talk by sense of belonging, right? This is where it all starts, where if you ask yourself that where do you belong to? And I think by understanding that, you get the notion that only a person who's belonging from some place is going to think about that place in some in a larger sense. If we look at the world and if we break it down to the level of an individual, and innovation should come through culture. And how that happens is by understanding that where do you feel that sense of belonging. Um, that sense of belonging is that intangible kind of feeling which we are looking for. And we can easily, I think, interpret the architectural drawings. We can easily document craftspeople, map craftspeople, and like record and document their skill set, even practice it. But the important thing is to understand the layers which are behind that um, measurable craftsmanship skills. So we need to look behind the meaning, which is basically behind these logics and these skills. And just to take this talk into a little different context, I would like to basically ask you guys that where this picture you think is from, right? Some of might you might get to know that okay, this cultural, this lady, very prominent cultural dress she's carrying, might somebody might figure it out. But if you see all the other things like this market, uh, it's full of common things. Same here, where we see all these common facades. same boards, same kind of streets. If you remove that church from this picture, I think it can be anywhere in the world. So my point is that our places are quickly losing this sense of character in the architecture and in the craftsmanship of that region, and they're becoming more and more common. And India is, I think, full of cultural heritage sites, and I think every village, every state has a very distinctive, architectural outcome, and it's still being practiced. So the thing is that we have this chance, like, we really have this chance, unlike many other countries of the world where it has been lost, and they have totally shifted to different methods and materials. India still has chance, and we need to understand it as designers, architects, or maybe anybody who's going to build something. And we have this chance to grasp it, understand it, and take it to the future. Coming back to Himachal, and this is the story of Himachal today. So I belong to Himachal, and this is the land of gods. What I mean to say with land of gods is that we and our gods live among us. We go to their celebrations, they come to us. If we have some festival, we all dance together, we all laugh together, we ask questions to them, they tell us what to do, what not to do. And even when we are in grief, they give us their shoulder. So by saying land of gods, I just don't mean that it's a temple or it's something like that. It's more than that. We live among them and they live among us. So that's very important to understand the context of Himachal. And slowly moving from the Devi Devtas of this region, who are the main, I think, the energy behind the mountains, and they own the land. And so then comes people. Our people, our ancestors were basically agriculturists, farmers. They were shepherds, and these people are like tribal people. Like, you have to understand that time of frame in mind. It is somewhere in 1500s, 1600s. At that time, this tribal regions were like working in full harmony with nature. And I'll be talking about travelers who have visited here from way past. But so these were small tribal regions. Um, let's say on this mountain, we are going to specifically be concentrating in the valley of Kullu, which is kind of central north of Himachal. And there were small tribes all around in the mountains. And and the road access was not even that much that people were having roads from one village to another. So these tribals were in their own mountain, in their own region, and they were they were working as a community. Like, when you are in such a secluded space surrounded by the wild, and there you are few people, few hundreds, and so your sense of community is very strong. And like, when men went out for the kettles, women were basically taking care of the farm, and sometimes men were doing the handloom, and women were basically doing something else, maybe in the household or something. So it's a very close knit community. When a person is making a house, there's somebody from the village who will be joining, and like, everybody comes along and help each other and celebrate functions together and all of these. So this community, these people are gods. And then there are these travelers who have like really wrote down in their travel logs how these times were. And so as early as 7th century AD, there was one of the oldest recorded written history of Kullu. This Chinese monk, Yusang, came to this region, and he talked about the farming. He talked about how people were, there were lots and lots of rice fields and paddy fields, and there were abundant fruits and food and crops. And people are fierce, and like, people are also really harsh because they are living in that. They are very kind of I think reactive to the strangers, I feel. And so still, that is, if somebody goes to a village, I think everybody will know that a new person is there in the village. So these travelers have traveled through time, from 7th century to till date, and they have published so many different travel logs where they talk about uh, the farming, the dresses of the women, vibrant colors, um, the men and their topis, and even they have appreciated the this art of Kathkuni, which is a very I think very well experimented technique from this region, which we are going to look upon later as well. They were limited to the local resources only. What that means is that only wood was here. We have abundant of pine woods over here, and then we have a lot of mountain stone, local mountain stone. And for the roofs, we have slate stone, which can be easily made into these sheets. And so roofs are with slate, and and there's a lot of water streams coming from, so water is not a big problem. Glacier water comes, and then there's a lot of wild, and people are trying to basically hunt and grow their own food. So everything was very closely knit into this local resource ecosystem, and hence was the materials which are being experimented with. And this picture is of a fort which is in Jubbal, which is beyond Shimla. And this is a fort which stands with almost five-story buildings, six-story buildings. There is Cheni Khoti in Banjar, which is a nine-story tall tower. Um, Load-bearing structures, stone and wooden structures, something like these, with beautiful slate roofs. And this all was happening through a lot of time. So there are thousands of years which have went in reaching to this level of craftsmanship, where people started with making very small shelters just to protect themselves under the stones, and like caves. And then they move on to creating like small stone structures, one room, which is basically a doggery kind of a space. And then they shifted to herding kettles, and that was when they kept the kettles on the ground floor and shifted to the top floor. So they built one more, and then because of the social lifestyle, I think they started spending some time. Mostly they were spending outside, so the time which is spent inside was for taking the sunlight. So a wraparound balcony came on, and in the top floor we have like an attic space where the temple of the house is basically on the top and on the most purest place. So people experimented and evolved with time, and with time also came trade. And we were basically on the route of Hindustan Tibet road, which was a part of Silk Route. And through Silk Route, it was in 1700s and 1800s, and it was like most booming. So there was a lot of trade happening. People from here were giving jaggery and rice to people beyond on the more harsher mountains in Tibet. People were taking these things and were in return giving goats. And so all these things were happening. And with trade, what comes is that there's a lot of exchange of ideas. Culture is exchanged. A lot of exposure is brought from different places, different people and their ways. So there was a lot of exchange happening in terms of knowledge and skills. And they might be meeting, I think, people from, because Chinese people were coming here, so they might have interacted about the architecture. And so there is one of the hypotheses is that Kathkuni might be a evolution where there was an exchange of ideas with Tibet, with China, with Japan, and similarly with Istanbul. You will find very similar architecture practice, and there must be some kind of a relation between them. Or the second thing is that they experimented in the same conditions, and they all basically came down to a very similar practice. Talking about the most three important things, basic needs of a life, which is food, shelter, and cloth. Any intangible practice or any intangible cultural heritage is best reflected through your these three basic needs. We have few people from Gujarat here, and like they received a parcel of a chakna and all these things. So happy, like they were like, you got the food from that region, and like if I get Sidhu somewhere in other part of India, I would be very happy. It's a memory. It is engraved in our childhood, our actions. So that taste of food, and then the shelter, how you make it. Like every place, India has, Assam has very different architecture, bamboo, and Gujarat has, Kutch has bunga houses, and so each context created like a very indigenous shelter for them, which was directly to fight the weather over there, the climatic conditions, and it is one of the very well researched techniques till date. Even a modern construction kind of most of the time takes references from that and biomimicry as well. um, so people farmed their own vegetables. They were keeping sheeps. So there's a time of the year when you take out hair of the sheep. They again grow till the winter comes, but you get something from that. It's like living in coexistence. And then you make threads out of it, and then you weave a good pattu for you, or a jacket for you. And so it's everything is coming from there. So self-sustainable in a way. And there comes the architecture as well. So Kathkuni, which is this is a very typical example of Kathkuni here, where you can easily see layers of stone and wood. Maybe in the next picture as well, you'll come to know that it was to protect from the harsh climate. That was the first need. The most basic need of the shelter was to basically protect the people from the wild and from the harsh weather, the geographical conditions. So the house, which is literally, it's a house which is literally built with like wooden Legos coming together, and stone is placed between them. Internal walls are being plastered with the mud, and the roof is with a mesh, a grid of again wood and then stone on the top, which is the slate. And very heavy irregular slates were used in the past, and very low slopes were there. So what it is in a way is it's a sustainable ecosystem, and it is again it really is a earthquake resistant technique. It carries the cultural values. You can see the carvings, and you can see all these sheep and goat. Okay, there might be some rituals which might have gone through this. This is a temple structure, and so it carries a lot of narratives which a building speaks to me about. And then there is this empirical knowledge of creating all these wooden joineries. There are no nails required in this, only wood and wooden pieces, everything very indigenous between wood and stone. And this craftsmanship was passed on from one generation to another, so it carries a lot of invaluable knowledge which needs to be seen first. So this is a typical section of a Kathkuni building. On the side, there are two pictures. The corner is basically the most interesting part of Kathkuni, because there are horizontal beams, which you can see in the diagram as well, layered. And then there is a layer of stone and stone from the alternate side. So the two beams coming from two different perpendicular directions intersect, and they are basically on a different level. So there is a groove which is being done on the top and the bottom log, and then there is a pin which comes between them. It's a wooden pin only of the same material. And see, what it means is that they knew that wood will basically rust if we put an iron needle over there. And that kind of attention to detail was there, because that's the life of the building. If your corner is weak, then the entire building structure and the life of that structure will basically have to compensate for that. So They created all these horizontal kind of layers of wood and stone, um, with this kind of a dovetail, kind of a joint in between, so that two beams are basically in place. And these are 18 inches thick walls. Stone has a lot of thermal mass, which basically provides, I think, the best possible insulation in this region with local material. Internal walls were plastered with mud, so that all these grooves of the stones are basically plastered. And the foundation was basically a 2 feet by 2 feet dug trench, all in the layout of the building, and you fill it with big stones, the biggest stones you find in the land, and then you start building this up. On the first floor comes the balcony, which extends out from on the cantilevers, and then there is the roof part of it. In Kathkuni, not just with this technique which they have evolved, our ancestors, they also took care of symmetry in the building, loads in the building. And because there's a lot of snow in these areas, a lot of harsh wind is blowing, so we have to take care about all those factors. And so nowadays we have softwares to see the wind load and all the snow ka load or yes, sir. But at that time it was all through experimentation. For them these were new materials, and there was no technical education as such. So you know, imagine how much time it would have taken uh, to them to understand nature first and observe and see what we can seek from it. And so for a cultural stability, a sense of community is very essential. This is what I really feel is and is missing from our kind of this time. The essence of the community comes from sharing similar beliefs, values, and different occupations, right? But the interactions within and outside of the community and the activities, all of these are basically coming together, and these factors um, create the key element of representing the culture of that space. It's very important to document these things along with the architectural kind of detailing which we do for documenting and in conservation and preservation. And from this point, I would like to take you towards the empowering part of it. I think once we know about the values which are going behind all of these, um, I think India at one point, every place was so rich. And Himachal, I feel very lucky that we still have this close knit kind of society till date. Our rituals are being followed very well, and even many other small villages in India. But the challenge for us is to take it forward, how to empower it, how to document it. We are talking about all of these, but how we can really take it forward, and who should do that. And there comes the starting point of this presentation, where we talked about the sense of belonging, um, really living in that thing, really living in that culture. So what I mean is that beyond economic values, beyond education in or through crafts, um, we this so the education through crafts develops the cognitive kind of approach and development, and it engages the learners. So while we are playing with the materials, while we are experimenting with the materials, it develops a lot of creativity, new discoveries and problem solving and practical approach to life. And that is important for us as humans, right? So craft kind of facilitates that as well. And making fosters well-being, making things, making getting the knowledge of the local and the things which are around you will foster a very happy and a fulfilling kind of a life for you. And this is a very vital part of us being as humans. तो ये जो सारा कल्चरल बैकग्राउंड है, दिस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर अस टू टेक फॉरवर्ड. We have not really taken it from the previous generations. We have borrowed it from the future generations, is my perspective. And we are at a very critical stage where we have a chance to secure this craftsmanship for future. The secret is that all the physical and geographical factors, environment, climate, they all contribute to all these indigenous techniques. And all these techniques are made after looking at climate and all these factors. And hence the traditional knowledge system was made along the nature. It was made with the nature, not against it. And as O.C. Handa has said it in one of his books, that they have learned through experience that the best way is not by harnessing nature, but by seeking from it. This line really resonates to me as well. Our ideas should give the power back to the locals and to the indigenous people. How to do that is through basically sharing your knowledge, um, maybe quality education, a lot of awareness, and these important pillars are to be, the soul of our practice, and then we move on with our innovations and with our design philosophy. So the sustainable way of living, which defines a culture of a context, is at the fundamental core of any craft practice. And design intervention limits are not just, to the process, they are to document everything as well and to understand everything as well. And there are these seeds of future, which are the children. We Our practice should revolve around learning and also sharing that with the future generations. Our future is in making, and it's in our own hands. And this is our center, which is Himachal Pradesh Craftsmanship and Design Innovation Institute, which basically believes in all this. This is our approach towards every project which we take on, or every activity which we basically do. And I think through this journey, the whole idea was to understand all these feelings behind it, right? So we are passionate about it. We and we really want to learn all of this, and that's being reflected in our design and in our processes and in our everyday life. And I hope this presentation mm, evoked some kind of emotions towards your belongings. Yeah, thank you. Ayaz.
Thank you, Rahul. Yeah, I request you to unshare your screen so that we can.
Sure. Yes.
Oh, there's something wrong. Well, thank you, first of all, for taking us through this wonderful journey and introducing us to the Himachal. Honestly, personally, it was for me. Of course, you've seen Kathkuni. A lot of documentation has been done here also, and there are students also have been doing some research thesis. But to place it in the context of the mountains of the Himachal as a region in the cultural context is, I think, that was something interesting to see through your presentation. So thank you so much for that. So there are a lot of, and then of course, it's not just about the cultural heritage as it is. So now there is the aspect that the North, which is your organization, now it is trying to come up and see as to how that particular heritage can be preserved. And you use the three interesting words which you meant: preserve, revive, and empower. So, through various activities at North, you are basically trying to make sure that that heritage is sort of still remains part of the current lifestyles. Although there are a lot of challenges that are thrown at that particular heritage. So, I would like to start by the this preserve, revive, and empower is seems to me a very interesting sort of sequence of how one can sort of intervene into this kind of a context. So let me start with the preserving. There's a lot of documentation that you showed to us. I'm talking about the Kathkuni technique And so there is a documentation of the heritage. One needs to understand how buildings are made. The architectural qualities is one part of it, but then the craftsmanship of it is the other part of it. So I'm sure there's a lot of documentation that North is into. So how do you go about documenting and mapping this heritage, which is Kathkuni architecture?
So see, the process is very simple. We start with um, doing a lot of village walks. We are living here, so the process is starting by living here first. I could have not done the same kind of practice by being anywhere else in the world. So the choice was to come and live here, even in spite any other architectural opportunities, or that was not in the mind. The importance was that we have to place ourselves inside the context, and then you start living it, understanding it, and then you document it. And so for us, like, it's a very like a daily activity where we are already going to a village, we know the families, and when students come to learn these techniques and to do internship with us, we basically take them to these houses, where to our village, and we document. We go to a house, we know the story of that house, and then we document it through that lens, right? हम बहुत सारे लोगों के साथ, I ask everybody to interact with each and everybody from the village, ask as many as questions, spend time there, so that you are not just doing documentation, but you are also mixing up with them, and that will give you the insights, like, which are very regional insights. And apart from the documentation process, I feel is very beautifully taught to us in our universities. And when we look at a building which is vernacular, we also come to know that there are so many like differences, and what we can say, like, faults and mismatches. So there is not a typical thumb rule kind of thing in documenting a vernacular technique. Every building will have different sizes of wood. Each Kathkuni building might have very different kind of approach of building. Somebody who is economically poor might not have used that much wood, might have optimized wood. More stones will be there. In different eras, when the buildings were built in, let's say, 100 years back and 50 years back, there's a difference in them. So each building carries the story as well. And I think why we are documenting these are because it's very tough for us to now rebuild them as they were. So this is also very important point to understand, that Kathkuni has flourished in the region, but like, for us to now make exactly same house with wood and stone and a lot of wood and stone is not really possible. And because the thing is that times have also changed. Those times were different, this time is different. Now we have transportation, we have different materials we can play with. We have very well connectivity, we know what's going around the world, so innovation can come in. And so the preservation becomes of utmost important, कि जितना है उतना तो preserve करके रखना ही चाहिए. Like what we have right now, we should not lose that. Future के लिए we should take the lessons from it, mix our own knowledge, innovation, and like move forward to that. So this is also, so that's why, like, I think preserve comes at the topmost priority.
Yeah.
And then revive with your design interventions.
Yeah.
And then comes empowerment, where once you are set, you have to not just think about documenting and doing project, but also empowering now, to educate about that, to spread awareness about that.
Yeah. No, it's very important to document, and as you said that there's a lot of diversity. I'm sure there must be. So different. I mean, Kathkuni is one sort of a way, maybe a technique of making houses, but within that also there might be a lot of variations. Region-wise, there might be also in terms of sizes, etc. What people can afford.
Relatives,
So
carvings are
yeah.
different.
Yeah. So, is there an effort? Because when you talk about vernacular, conserving vernacular architecture, of course, the government, the agencies are also very much at times play a big role. So, is there a kind of an approach to make a kind of a categorization, a sort of a kind of an inventory of what actually exists on ground? I mean, is North trying to make that kind of an archive or inventory?
Bilkul, bilkul. So see, what we feel is that number one thing which is missing is that there we don't know where the craftspeople are. So when I came to Himachal and when I was looking for craftspeople for the projects, we were not really getting a lot of craftspeople who were interested. Or first, because these are more commercial, like people now who are into the rapid, construction techniques. So जो वो essence of जो असली master craftspeople थे, those were very hard to find. तो हमारा first step is that mapping should be done, and that mapping will help anybody. It becomes like a resource data for people to look upon. And we are basically doing a lot of documentation of old villages as well, ताकि वो heritage village, any village which wants to, Himachal government is moving towards heritage villages, and so there should be a proper documentation of all these villages, so that अगर कभी data चाहिए हो तो we can say that okay, this is what we have already documented for you. Now you make, तो हम हमारा क्या है कि it should be facilitating government also to take decisions. अभी government of Himachal, yes, tourism भी है, forest भी है, PWD भी है, there's so many things happening there. So we can become like that facilitator, that center for the government, and similar organize, like anybody can do that in their own region, like this kind of centers are in need, where you do that documentation, you kind of become that resource data person, and work hand to hand with government. And सही है, गवर्नमेंट ने भी बहुत कुछ किया है. देयर इज आर्ट एंड कल्चर डिपार्टमेंट इन हिमाचल व्हिच हैव ऑल दीज ट्रैवल लॉग्स जो हमारे को मिले, ये सब पुराने, दे आर देयर. ये हिस्ट्री की जारी फोटोग्राफ्स हैं, दे आर फ्रॉम रॉरिक म्यूजियम का बहुत अच्छा आर्काइव है इन नग्गर ओनली. सो दे हैव ऑल दीज डॉक्यूमेंटेशंस. तो अच्छा है, लाइक देयर शुड बी, आई थिंक the idea is to work hand in hand with government right now, and we are up for it.
So I think, like as you said, so one part I was going through your presentation is about preserving, documenting, mapping, making archives, and making it available to all the people who are trying to make effort in restoration. But that's not the only part at the north. I mean, you were talking about engaging the community, right, through various kind of cultural activities that you showed. Now, how important you think? Sorry, just a minute, my mistake. So, how important is this community participation in the process of preserving this cultural heritage, particularly the vernacular buildings, as per your experience?
So see, if you talk to any कारीगर, अगर आप उससे directly मिलने जाएंगे, first time you ask a questionnaire to them, I think 90% of the answers will be like something else. So if you meet them once, twice, thrice, you build that trust, you be there in that, like you feel comfortable with them, and then this things starts to come out, like real pictures comes out. Or anybody who have done craftspeople mapping or like have interacted with craftspeople will understand this point कि एकदम से open नहीं होते, तो वो एक connection build करना पड़ता है. And it's so to change this word terminology, वो connection हमको build करना पड़ता है for documenting, but our approach should be कि हम पहले connection बनाएं, and then we start on with the process of documenting and like taking data or whatever. उनसे कुछ भी पूछना है, skill लेना है कुछ, तो वहीं से start हो जाता है community engagement. तो and then I come from Himachal, I feel proud of like taking this community forward. So हमारे लिए तो अच्छा है, it's like a celebration. We do nati time to time, हमारे सारे interns हम लोग सब मिलके we do nati, हम local festivals में जाते हैं, हम यहाँ पे आसपास लोकल्स के साथ मिलते हैं, बैठते बात करते, शाम को क्रिकेट खेलने जाते हैं. तो वो एक पार्ट ऑफ कम्युनिटी, तो आई थिंक इज द एसेंस ऑफ बीइंग हियर. देन वी आर लाइक ट्रूली इन्वॉल्वड इन द प्रोसेस, आई थिंक. नहीं तो इफ वी आर, नहीं तो हमारे लिए क्या होगा, काम की तरह हो जाएगा. अभी फॉर अस इट इज लाइक डेली लाइफ, वी आर जस्ट डूइंग इट आउट ऑफ प्योर पैशन एवरी डे.
Yeah, I think that's I get your point. So let me talk about the second part, which is the revival. What is said, though the lot of these small towns, villages are going through a lot of these economic, social, cultural transition. There is a lot of migration that is happening towards towns, bigger cities in search of aspirations, and that sort of makes these vernacular buildings sort of abandoned in many times. And if you remember, I think there's a town called Sidhpur in Gujarat. It's a classic example of that. The whole town is pretty much intact, but everyone has moved out of it. And so, how is Himachal also going through the similar kind of a crisis where the buildings are abandoned and no one to take care of that?
Mhm. See, there's a slight difference in Himachal from other states. Himachal, from last 30 years, has been pumped by tourism industry. So the lack of, let's say, occupation or employment is not really here. Number one, compared to Uttarakhand, I think it is in that senses. So yeah, tourism बहुत सही था. So there are many people who have come into this industry now, and because of that, there are very less people who have migrated out. There are, yes, there are young individuals who might have gone, let's say, they became engineers or they got jobs outside Himachal. That is a different scenario. But I say due to lack of something, was very less migration has happened in Himachal. Abandoned. Why the houses are being abandoned is that people had these old houses. They have a lot of land as well. Now with the changing needs, people have left that house and built a new house for them in a, maybe let's say in a new land or maybe somewhere in the same vicinity. तो इसलिए पुराने buildings abandoned हो रहे हैं, and still they are being used as storages in many houses. If you feel एक नया घर होगा साथ में, but पुराने घर में winters में लोग सोने के लिए जाते हैं because they know कि winters in concrete building will not really work for them. तो winters में they shift to Kathkuni houses. Storage तो करते ही हैं, kettles को रखते हैं. या अगर नहीं होगा किसी के पास all of these things, then their house might be like, let's say, abandoned. So that's the scenario.